Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Post-Separation Abuse Podcast. Today, I'd like to introduce our new senior coach at Danielle Black Coaching, Brigid Morgan. Welcome, Brigid.
Thank you, Danielle. Hello.
Brigid's role on our team is, at this stage, primarily supporting parents who are navigating shared parenting without formal court orders, but they're still wanting to prioritise their child's developmental needs in a way that's really informed, intentional, but also sustainable. And I think that sustainability piece is really important because sometimes what might seem to work or what might seem to be appropriate initially might not really last the distance in terms of that appropriateness for meeting our children's needs, developmental needs, as well as just age-related needs. And obviously this includes the parents who are wanting to parent protectively, also parents who are wanting to be able to set and maintain appropriate boundaries with the other parent. I think sometimes we can fall into a trap of thinking that if we don't have formal court orders, that we're very limited in what we're able to do in terms of boundaries, in terms of making genuine decisions for our children, on behalf of our children. We can be concerned about escalating conflict unnecessarily. All of those things are things that Brigid has lived experience with and is here on our team to support parents with. She's also originally from the US, but is now an Australian citizen. And this background really gives Brigid the ability to understand that additional complexity that separation and co-parenting can involve for expat parents. For example, navigating the stress of separation, divorce, co-parenting when your significant support network might be overseas. It's lovely to have you here with us today. Now, Brigid, some lighthearted questions for you because this is going to help our listeners, our community get to know you a little bit better. And I have to be fair because they're questions that I've also asked Trudy. So here we go. The first one, are you a morning person or a night owl?
Okay, I'm going to go with morning, but there is a bit of a caveat there because I've had to train myself to become a morning person. I think left to my own devices, I'd probably be a bit of a night owl. So, bit of both, really.
Like Trudy. Trudy's a night owl, as people might remember.
I have actually got a really solid morning routine now that I have, like I said, trained myself into, but I tend to try and get up a little bit before my son so that I have time to obviously feed the cats and do all the business. But I have a morning journaling practice and I have a special, coffee ritual and just set myself up for the day so that I feel grounded and hopeful and inspired.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Brigid. That segues really nicely into our next question. Are you a coffee or tea drinker in the morning?
100% coffee. Strong and dark.
Woman after my own heart.
I have to say, Danielle, I don't limit my coffee drinking to the morning. Just putting that out there.
Well, I'd love to not have to limit my caffeine intake, but I'd be staring at the ceiling if I did not. So it's decaf for me past lunchtime.
Wise
Nobody wants me bouncing off the walls late into the evening. So how do you take your coffee? This is, I'm intrigued now. You mentioned a morning coffee ritual. Now that the listeners can't see this, but I can see Brigid on video actually while we're having this conversation. She just took a sip of something. Was that coffee?
Yes.
It's 1 p.m. So you're living life on the edge for, in my world. So how do you like your coffee to be, Brigid?
Well, it's actually a little bit unique, I think. So I mix the grinds with cinnamon and I brew it up in a espresso pot. And then I used to do like a keto coffee, like a bulletproof, but now I do just a little dash of MCT oil, which is like the coconut oil. So it just, it gives my brain the boost it needs first thing in the morning. I think the key to the ritual really is that I have a beautiful pot and cup. So in a world where, life can be so hectic and your budget's restricted and you just have like a few little nice things that really feel like upgrades and they're quite special and they're just for you, they can make all the difference. So there's something about with this beautiful ornate coffee pot filled with the coffee the way I like to drink it, the way my body and my brain needs it, in a beautiful gold cup, put it on a tray, and I carry it into my room and I light a candle and I do my journaling to my meditation music. And the whole thing takes about 20 minutes, but it definitely sets me up for the day. I feel, ready for most things.
I love that, and it's very inspiring. I'm thinking maybe I need to upgrade because I'm just a black coffee, just a pod in the Nespresso, and that's me first. This is early in the morning before the children are up and about, but I don't have the ritual that you have, but you've really inspired me. Okay, thank you very much for letting all of us know about how you're drinking your morning beverage. Brigid, next question. Beach or mountains?
I'm gonna step outside the box. Forests, woods, bush, trees. Is that okay to break the rules?
That's very okay. Mountains is bush for me, I guess.
Yeah.
That's how I think
It's
about
close.
the bush and the forest and
If I had to choose between the two, it would be mountains. But it's a bit tricky because my son loves the beach. So I've had to also become a beach person to support him in his interests and passions. But my happy place would be like forest bathing, trees, woodlands, inland water like rivers, waterfalls, sometimes lakes, creeks. Yeah, love it.
Beautiful. A phone call or text message?
Text message.
Now, Bridget and I have already had a conversation about this.
My phone is perennially on silent.
And Bridget had sent me a text message and I responded by calling her. And I thought, she might be available, she might not be available, but that'll be quicker than sending a text message. And she answered and she was a bit surprised because normally she's, not available and doesn't answer. And we had a little bit of a chat then about how we approach things fairly differently in terms of talking or texting. So your answer does not surprise me.
Yeah, I wish I could be a phone call person.
Trudy and I might convert you.
It saves time. All right, well, I have to try. The only reason I answered that call is because I was expecting a call from someone else from a clinic at the time. So I was ready to, receive the call, but it was surprisingly
you had the phone ready.
Equally wonderful. Yeah. I like text because I think you can plan what you're going to say. I had read somewhere that people who have been gaslit or who have had come from traumatic experiences prefer communication in writing for this reason, because when they have verbally communicated in the past, they've either not been heard or their words have been used against them, twisted, or there's been manipulation. And I think that that's part of the way that I operate is email and text, because the evidence of what I have said or communicated is in writing. Literally, it can't be changed.
Absolutely. No, that's such an important point and an important distinction there as well. And I think there's probably so many of our listeners who can relate to that. And I relate to that a lot as well. I think for me, it depends on who the person is that I'm communicating with. And I do think I tend to be a better communicator verbally when I have the opportunity to speak to someone. Sometimes I worry that in writing that the nuance can be lost. But if it's something factual, and if it's perhaps not with somebody that I know very well, then yes, I much prefer to keep things in writing. But Trudy and I do send voice memos to one another, which I think we both find more convenient than text. Trudy and I have had some really huge conversations just with back and forth voice memos. Now, Brigid, I think I know the answer to this next question because we've spoken about this before, but would you say that you're a dog person or a cat person?
Definitely a cat person. I've had cats all my life. I have 2 amazing older cats right now who I adore. And my son and I, we go to cat cafes on a regular basis just to get even more cat doses. Yeah, we love cats.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We've all learned a little bit more about you. Brigid, is there something in particular from your own journey that you would say shapes or influences the way that you coach other parents?
Well, I think that I had to become very heavily resourced, being on my own pretty much here, not having any family in this country apart from the one with whom I was separating and his ties. So I had to lean in a lot to my chosen family or community resources. I sought professional supports, and I was also able to access some, government supports and things that I was eligible for at the time, all of which I am incredibly grateful for, because no one can do this journey alone. So I just want to recognize that, resourcing yourself through your self-care, your health and nervous system regulation is a huge part of this coming through the other side of this journey. And that's why I'm passionate about coaching into those topics. And I also, a lot of this, I think sometimes you can feel really unseen, unheard, unvalidated. I think what I found, particularly, through coaching with you, Danielle, and also the community that you've fostered and include as part of access to you, is this beautiful community of other people who've had similar journeys, is this sense of being seen and heard and being validated and being affirmed. I bring that into my coaching, is a sense of compassion and empathy, and also just validation that no, you're not seeing things wrong. No, you're not misinterpreting. No, you're not too much. No, you're not being too this, too that. Yes, this is a real experience. Yes, this is challenging. And then trying to adapt to a child-focused solution pathway as quickly as possible so that you can get on with your life. That's the end goal. It's not to stay in this situation forever, but to maximize your outcome as best you can in favor of what your children need and what you need to be able to move on with your life and rebuild your life, there is so much out there waiting for you. So that sense of hope, I think, is something I bring as well to coaching, is this, when you're in the dark place or it seems really, really hard, and it is really, really hard, that, there is so much hope and possibility and beauty and joy and wonder and love on the other side of that as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Brigid. There's so much in there that you've shared that we could unpack. I think what's really stood out to me, and probably I think to all of our listeners, is that the journey of post-separation for anyone who is here from another country, potentially similar to you, where their main support person is the person that they've separated from, so incredibly challenging. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of people listening as well who have experienced something similar. Maybe they're navigating something similar right now, who will really resonate with what you've shared, and the way in which you were able to resource yourself throughout that time is so incredibly inspirational. And as you mentioned, you and I connected, you reached out. How do you think coaching with me has impacted you in your post-separation journey?
How much time do I have? I'm a huge fan. Obviously, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't, but literally life-changing. I can say that in all honesty, in the sense of, we've talked about this a little bit before, Danielle, as well, that there's the situation and the circumstance that you're getting through, which is what sort of brings us to this space. But then there's also your life beyond that, which can be very hard to even imagine or consider when you are in the thick of something. But having come through, this is a 5-year journey for me now, and I feel like I'm only just at the end of the season of really finishing that divorce and post-separation experience. in a place where I feel, much more capable, and my capacity is just been so increased. So I'm seeing that these skills that I learned in the situation and the circumstance that brought me here are actually really relevant to life in general. And that is an unexpected gift that came from the work with you. But in terms of actually getting through my divorce journey, I had felt so untethered and completely lost because there is a lot of information out there. One of them is the legal pathway. And I had a lot of friends who were going through similar journeys, maybe a few steps ahead of me or a few steps behind me, who were more financially resourced, who could just go down that legal pathway. And, I would watch them pay all this money. And I don't mean this to sound like I'm not advocating for accessing legal support. I'm not saying that. But there's this false idea, I think, that you can just pay a lawyer to have your back. And that's a good deal, right? That's good bang for buck. You pay the lawyer, they have your back, and you get through it. What I was seeing was that you're paying all the money and they don't have your back. And they're missing things, and there are really significant balls getting dropped and real harm happening. And I was more terrified to engage a legal team than I was to try and navigate this myself. At one point, I was like, if I knew that I could get my outcome maximized through going this pathway, I would find the money. I would beg, borrow, steal, I would be able to do that. But I was like, there's no guarantee I'm going to get what I'm hoping for, because I'm not seeing very affirming stories. And again, I don't mean to put any sort of fear energy out there, because I'm sure there are great lawyers, and I did connect with some good legal representation at different points and through different means. But I guess that simplistic idea of, if I get a good lawyer, all my problems will be solved, that is a myth, right? So for me, coming to the coaching work with you, suddenly I found that I could pretty much have this understanding, this wealth of experience that you have through supporting clients through the legal channels. It was almost like I could learn from others' mistakes. I was engaging with a sense of cautionary tale of what not to do as much as what to do. I was learning about the separation process. Most importantly, I was learning about it in an Australian context, because again, there's a lot of information out there, but it's heavily biased to America. Like I did sink quite a bit of money into, trying to buy books or online courses and things, but they were all very tailored to American family court systems, which, I could glean, I could pull some of it off the top, but when it came to the nitty gritty, it wasn't applicable here. So I was getting this Australian context. And I think for me, the biggest game changer was the fact that the work with you was child focused and protective parenting. And I wasn't seeing that out there either. This sense of understanding your child. You know your child best. You are the expert in your own child. Nobody was telling me that. Nobody was saying that. It was like this generic sort of one size fits all, what's best for the child. We're not talking about the child. We're talking about my child. My child. In my situation, I was primary carer from birth. My son is neurodiverse. He hadn't been diagnosed at the time of the separation, but I had been initiating supports, and I had also begun the assessment process. He's since been diagnosed, and he's since got a lot of official supports in place, which is fantastic, seeing the benefit and the value of that. But at the time of the separation, there was this presupposition or this generic default go-to around the 50-50 split, and I knew in my heart and my instinct that this was not going to work for where my son was in terms of his neurotype and in terms of his developmental needs. And I tried very, very hard, very authentically to engage with his dad on that topic. And there was no collaboration. There was no openness. Yeah, he wanted to go down the road of 50-50. And I just could not do that. I knew it would not be best for my son. So when I came into your orbit and I saw how you help parents advocate for a child-focused outcome within the Australian context, and your website very clearly articulates the type of situation that I could really deeply resonate with: the conflict, the lack of collaboration, the undermining, like all of that. I was like, I've done as much as I can within myself. I need help. I am not the expert in how to navigate this situation. Yeah, I reached out, and it was all really for my son, and the best outcome that I could imagine or envision for him, given the uncomfortable circumstances we had found ourselves in.
Thank you so much, Brigid. Again, just so much insight and absolutely true. And I think there'll be so many listeners who are nodding along to what you shared about, looking at what other people were experiencing when they're engaging with lawyers, starting to recognise that, hang on a second, I can be paying a small fortune to a lawyer, and that doesn't mean that they have my back. That doesn't mean that any outcome is guaranteed. And again, just something that I know that so many people resonate with. So many of our clients, they've engaged lawyers. A lot of our clients are in the court system, despite the fact that they'd rather not be, but they still need the support of coaching. They need that support to become the expert in their own child that really they already are, but it's about the embodying that. And I think that's what you've articulated so well. You already knew that what your former partner, your child's other parent, was wanting in parenting orders, or rather parenting arrangements. You knew that that wasn't right for your child, but the missing piece, I think, was really you feeling empowered to hold that line really firmly, to understand the evidence around that as well, to really be able to embody being that protective parent. And as your former coach, it's something that you did exceptionally well. And I think that's highlighted in the fact that you don't have 50-50 parenting arrangements. You have avoided the court system. That's not to say that there hasn't been challenges along the way, and there'll be plenty more episodes to come where we can unpack some of that, because we certainly don't want to be giving anyone the impression that you can just of your own accord opt out of legal proceedings. Not everybody has that option. And it also doesn't mean that everything is smooth sailing. So lots that we can unpack there, but we will save that for another time. But thank you so much, Brigid, for that incredibly insightful and thoughtful response. And I'm so, so glad not only that you're here with us as a coach on our team, but also that you connected with me and that you were really able to embody that energy of being that protective parent who is, absolutely the expert in your child.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you so much.
Now, our final question with Brigid for today's episode is about the blueprint. Listeners, you're probably sick of hearing me talk about the blueprint, but anyone who has access to the blueprint knows why I talk about it, knows why it's our foundational resource. Brigid, you've had an opportunity to dive into the post-separation parenting blueprint. Could you share what some of your first impressions have been with the blueprint?
Yes, well, I've said before, like, I wish this had been a resource available to me when I first found you, something that has emerged since I've come sort of through the end of my cycle. But I feel like it is so foundational, no matter where you are in your separation journey. And I love it has an element of being a resource that you can enter and exit as needed. There's not a chronological, it's not a chronological course that you have to go through from number one to, the end. And that's really reflective. I think that's really insightful that you built it that way, because it's reflective of what these journeys can be like. They can feel very chaotic and destabilizing and confusing. One day it might be about how can I regulate myself so that I can give a grounded response to this crisis? Or how can I regulate myself to be the best parent for my child who needs me right now when I'm already overwhelmed by this situation of, whatever's just been thrown at me or whatever, yeah, I've just encountered. So there's that sense to it. Sometimes you might have a calmer level of engagement where you want to go in and be like, okay, so what am I thinking strategically moving forward? How can I deal with this decision about court or not court, or prepare for these professionals that I'm engaging with, or, how I document. I think that's a really important element of this entire journey, as well as the documentation. I think Trudy's got a small group coming up about that as well, which I'm really excited to hear more about too. So for me, though, what really stood out, which I love, is again, when I found you, it was the Australian context, child-focused, protective parenting, but it was also diving into the evidence-based, age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate aspects of who your child is and where they're at. That, for me, is my favorite module. It's my favorite module because, again, this isn't generic stuff. We're not talking about the child or the children. We're talking about, your kids. Like, how old are they? And what's their personality like? What's their neurotype? What's their background? Their cultural background. Like, we're all so unique. So to even just be able to understand from a psychology perspective and a developmental perspective, I mean, we're parents, we're not child psychologists, we're not teachers. We tend to take on all these roles as and when needed, as we have capacity, if we have capacity. But ultimately we're parents, and we're not experts in each and one of every of these fields. So what you've done with that module, I think, is so, so helpful, because you can tune into, a toddler's needs are so different from a primary school kid's needs, or someone who's neurodivergent may have, there's evidence to show that their chronological age is actually a bit younger. So you might, be able to view them in a younger category, even though their chronological age is a bit older, and what's relevant for them. And we're talking about things that impact their well-being and their health, and their mental health. So that the whole, just something as basic as care arrangements. What's appropriate? Is it appropriate for a toddler to have a week on, week off in a 50-50 care arrangement? I know what you're going to say to that, but we're looking at attachment. We're looking at who's the primary caregiver from birth, and how to step transitions in, how to, protective parenting isn't about, absconding with your child into a cave where they never have contact with the other parent. Maybe that's appropriate, because there are some situations I know where there's significant abuse and harm being done. And that is the right approach, no contact. But in this middle area where we're sort of just ordinary people trying to step through these extraordinary circumstances and do the best for our kids, and we're not coming from a background of, psychology or, mental health, we can come to the blueprint, we can come to that module, my favorite module, and we can just get a snapshot of understanding about safety, about what their needs are, about how to strategically determine, schooling, care arrangements, health supports, future focused step transitions that can become more flexible as they grow, as they mature, as they increase their capacity and become more resourced, either through age or with supports for, whatever their neurotype is. So the blueprint takes an incredibly complex and unique scope and breaks it down into little chunks. And you can just go to the chunk that is relevant for you at that time, even within one module of your children are this age and this circumstance, and you're trying to work out care arrangements. So here's some really useful, tangible, solid guidelines and guardrails and information based on evidence, and then you can make an informed decision. And that's one of the best things I think you can do as a protective parent, is make those informed decisions rather than feel like you're bullied or pressured, or that maybe you are acting out of fear and you're trying to control a bit too much. Maybe it is better for them to have something different than what you would hope for as their ideal, but you can make an informed decision when you're looking at evidence-based research.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brigid, for, again, such a well thought out and insightful response. And I'm so pleased that that's your favourite module, because it's also one of my favourites. And, one of the main reasons why I created the blueprint, which originally was not going to be anywhere near as big as what it ended up being. The problem is that I started creating it, and then there were more things that I thought, oh, well, hang on a second. No, parents also need to know this. But that module that you touch on, it's so relevant. And I think for so many parents listening, this will potentially resonate, because a lot of the reason why people reach out to us for coaching, particularly when it's in early separation, it's because they're really unsure about what they should be agreeing to in mediation for a parenting plan, or perhaps their former partner has initiated court proceedings and then trying to get their head around, well, what on earth do I say that I'm seeking in interim parenting orders? I don't know what's appropriate. And again, this links really nicely, I think, to what you were sharing in terms of you felt that particular arrangements were not going to be in your son's best interests. And so many parents that come to us, they do have this inner knowing of what's right and what's not right, but it can be so hard to make sense of any of that, to articulate that. It can sometimes feel quite vague. It can sometimes feel quite intangible. You don't necessarily always have the language. You might not know whether or not it's defensible. Is there any basis for this? What is a lawyer going to think? My ex has had different legal advice. Is his legal advice better than my legal advice? All of those sorts of things. And so I think the blueprint does help to fill that gap. It's a space where people can come to, whether they work with us one-on-one or not. And lots of people access the blueprint and don't reach out for coaching immediately, some not for quite a while, depending on where they're at in their journey, because it does provide that framework. It can help to give them language to describe what they already feel about what's appropriate or not. And I think that's something that's really powerful as well. It can back up and it can validate what they've already been thinking in terms of what's appropriate or not appropriate. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Brigid. It was lovely to have you on the podcast, and I know this is going to be the first occasion of many. To all of you who are listening, thank you so much. We appreciate the fact that you have taken time out of your day to listen, to tune in, to share in this conversation that we're having, and we look forward to connecting with you very soon.
There's a moment where the noise stops landing, where the chaos loses its hold.
That's it for today's episode of the Post-Separation Abuse Podcast. If you found this helpful, you'll love the Post-Separation Parenting Blueprint, the foundation of everything that my team and I teach, now available to all protective parents. Whether you work with us one-on-one or navigate your journey independently, the blueprint is where everyone starts. Whether you're thinking about separating, in the early stages of separation, wanting to avoid your kids being trapped with unsafe or inappropriate care arrangements, or perhaps needing to challenge and change current arrangements, and even if you're currently in the court system for parenting matters. I created the blueprint as a gift to all of my fellow protective parent warriors, because the journey of being a change maker and a cycle breaker can't be done alone, and the blueprint is the one post-separation parenting resource that gets it right. Child development, safety and well-being put first, with the evidence to back it up. The blueprint gives you the same strategic frameworks that my team and I use in private one-on-one coaching, and It's available on an online platform for you to access whenever and wherever you need. You can also ensure that you're up to date with any new announcements by checking in regularly to the website danielleblackcoaching.com.au. Until next time, take care. And please always remember, you are your child's greatest protector.
Calm is credible, steady and strong. You don't have to fight the same way for long. You protect, you lead, you rise with fire in your bones and truth in your eyes. This is how it begins, not in chaos but clarity within. You protect, you lead, you rise. This isn't revenge, this is design, a future rewritten line by line. You don't burn it down, you build it right with wisdom, strategy, and quiet mind.